From far around they saw us burn, by Alice Jolly. We are the children of Cavan. Do you know that place? It is a border town betwixt and between, a place of crossroads, and yet strangely few pass by there. The land around is low and sodden, a place of scrub and straggly pines, lanes and paths leading nowhere. The damp comes up through the soles of your boots and clots in the lungs. The town of Cavan itself has a wide main street of many fine buildings, and yet it seems the sun never shines at an angle to touch the stonework there. Walking the main street, you pass the Central Hotel, the Farnham Arms, Fegan's the Draper, and Sullivan's the General Store. And then, of course, the convent buildings and the orphanage. Those buildings are there, and yet they are not. For that place is never opened up, the nuns being a closed order, so though the many windows face onto the street, the glass is opaque and obscured by bars. We orphanage girls are never seen except when we go to the cathedral for Mass. And should you ever have cause to knock, the nun who unlocks the door will keep to the side so that you may not see her, for that is the way of our world. It was the Sullivan family who knew of it first. Sitting up late in the kitchen over a game of penny poker with some of their staff who lived then on the premises, as was the way at that time. And Louis Blessing was there, he who was famous for playing football, for he was gone on Sissy Riley as worked the grocery counter. Over the road in Fegan's, the drapery store, yet others were still awake. A group of young men returned from a badminton party, lying several to a bed, laughing and joking yet. The streetlights were off. The last Guard-a-Foot patrol was back at the station. The only man abroad was James Meehan, the taxi driver, who arrived at the Farnham Arms. Later, he was sure of the exact time, 10 to 2. Then come 2 o'clock, that party at Sullivan's broke up. And then it was that Sissy Riley stood up from the card table and walked over to the window, pulled back the fringed velvet curtain, looked out into the yard to see what weather they might expect the following day. For Sullivan's, you see, was next door to the convent and overlooked the orphanage. At first, Sissy thought it was a low mist she saw. Others crowded next to her to give their opinions. The night was clear, with no sight of stars but a high, ragged moon with shreds of cloud racing past it. All were agreed. It was smoke, pumping out of a vent in the orphanage wall. In the Sacred Heart dormitory, we orphanage girls felt it first as a settling of boards, the scraping of a hinge, a sound like a yawn, a taste of ash at the back of the throat. But we were feared to get up. Many a night we had lain there needing to relieve ourselves, but too frightened to go to the pot. So though we heard Mary Caffey's footsteps go to the cubicle to get Miss O'Reilly, still we lay rigid in our beds. The building was without light, only the moon slanting silver at the windows. Yet we heard Mary's feet go pat-pat again down the wooden stairs to the first story, along the corridor, up another flight of stairs to the cell of Sister Felix. Then a harsh noise broke on our ears, drilling into the restless night. It was the ringing of the doorbell at the convent, a sound we did not oft hear. And this was a long ring, then hardly a moment of silence, then another long ring, followed by many short jabs at the bell, so that then some of the girls who were close to the windows pulled themselves up on their beds so that they might see out. From the laundry, they said. That's where it's coming. By then, some of us older girls had gone into St. Clair's dormitory across the corridor, or even downstairs to Our Lady's. You would never generally have done such a thing, but by then it was not just the bell ringing. Also, from outside the gate came shouting and a blunt thumping. You might have thought it was the sound of a fist slamming or a foot kicking, and perhaps at first it was, but soon we knew that it must be an axe which was splitting the door. Suddenly the lights came on and we all stood blinking in our white night dresses, standing between the 6 rows of iron beds. Veronica, Bernadette, and the Cassidy girls, Mary and Susan McKiernan, and also Mary Lowry, who wore a gold cross around her neck. She had it as a prize from the bishop, for she had a calling, was soon to become a nun. Those up at the window whispered the news back to us. They saw Sister Felix with a key, which she gave to Mary Caffey. Surely it was the door to the main entrance of the convent. Then another noise, raucous and jaunty. A car horn, bleeping in short bursts again and again. Later it was recorded that it was Sissy Riley as started the banging. For how else could they wake the sleeping nuns and alert them to the danger? Then the man from Sullivan's, John McNally, was kicking with stout boots. until those young men from Fegan's drapery came, them who had returned from the badminton, who brought an axe to smash it in. Some said it was 5 minutes they were there, others more like 10, but they could not get in. Louis Blessing, the football player, he had run up the road to the Garda station to raise the alarm there. As he came running back, he found James Meehan, the taxi driver, who had been sleeping with his head on the car wheel. Louis shouted at him, "Drive the car down, drive it down." So Louis got into the passenger seat and they drove down together. Louis said, "Blast the horn, blast it loud." But James, still half asleep, did not take his meaning, so Louis leaned across and pressed on the horn again and again. When the taxi pulled up outside the convent gate, Louis said, "Quick, man, quick, drive on now, get your foot down." "To the house of Mr. Monahan. Surely he will know how we can enter the building." That he said, for Mr. Monahan was the convent's farm steward, and so was one of the few that came into those buildings. But then it was that Mary Caffey finally got the lock turned, and the door of the convent was opened. She waved her scattered arms then in the direction of the laundry, but John McNally was having none of that. "Get the children out. Do you not see? The fire is spreading." He spoke then to a nun, but she said, "No, no, no. He must go in the laundry first." He said, "Then give me the keys." But she had not any keys. John McNally looked up at the building, a place he had seen oft before through the windows of Sullivan's, so he knew what a maze it was. A knot of staircase and corridors, inside and out, wooden and metal. How might you find your way in or out? Yet he could see the fire escape which was up on a wooden landing outside the upper dormitories. Some others said to him, "We will try the fire escape. You see if the laundry door will give." But a nun said, "No, no, come down off there. It is the fire in the laundry which must be put out." So then a group of them ran to the laundry door, but it was still locked. The nuns said, "No, no, you must wait for the key." But the men knew better and kicked it in. Still, the nuns did not want anyone up the fire escape, but Louis and Sissy went up anyway. Yet at the second floor they were stopped by a locked door into a classroom. Louis kicked at it, then tried to climb around it, but it would not give. They went back down to find something with which to break it in. All this was said later when the inquiry came. While all this was passing, we girls were waiting in the Sacred Heart dormitory, our hands knotted together, the little ones silent and hollow-eyed. Some stood up at the window or sat on their beds, but some still had their heads under pillows, wanting to sleep. In that harsh and untimely light, it seemed that everything in that room sparkled, and perhaps it did. For everything in that convent shone, the floorboards, the iron beds, the wood of the cupboard doors, even the skirting boards and the ceilings themselves. We were clean girls. When Miss O'Reilly came into the Sacred Heart dormitory, she was not at all fussed. When she saw us at the window, she said, "Stop that now. Get down on your knees and pray. Say an act of contrition." Miss O'Reilly then crossed over into St. Clair's S. When she came back, she said, "You best go into the other dormitory until the door opens and things get fixed up." So we ran then into St. Clair's yes, pulling the little ones with us. The sound we made woke any there who were not yet out of bed. Yet we noticed even then how the girls got up, called out to ask what the disturbance was, but then oft did sink back into bed, their heads being sent funny by the smoke, though you could see but little of it yet. Some of us then crowded to the window of that dormitory. From there we saw the Garda and a group of others who seemed to be arguing over a mop. Some had gone into the infirmary and were carrying out the babies. Then the bottom door burst open. We heard the sound of it go, and girls started pouring out, their white nightdresses swelling as they ran, their hair long and straggling. They coughed and cried, stumbled, their eyes streaming, their hands gripped at their throats. They said later that it was James Meehan, the taxi driver, who went to fetch the town's fire brigade. They came then with a handcart and some lengths of hose which had been given to them by the waterworks caretaker. Yet at this time they still could not get into the courtyard as the gate was not unlocked, so they had to break the parlor window in the convent and climb in that way. As they did so, others connected the hose to the standpipe in the street. But soon it was found that the hoses were leaking so badly that when the water was switched on, it could but dribble out. My sister, I must get her down." That shout came from Kathleen, looking for Bernadette. Other voices came up from down the wooden stairs, then banging and coughing, a sound of choking. But no one came up the stairs, only a wall of smoke. We need a key for the fire escape. Where is the key? Everywhere those words were being shouted as people fumbled and searched and questioned. We need a gas mask. We'll not get through without. These voices we heard from the other side, where the door was, the way out to the fire escape, and a frantic banging as though someone was trying to break through a door with a stick. We said to each other, we must pray. We must say an act of contrition. But we could think of no prayers. We need to have air. We need to have air. Then suddenly all was dark, not just our dormitory, but the courtyard down below and all the convent too. We heard then a door breaking somewhere close and a rush of air, which pushed the smoke further upon us. Then another door opening and another rush of smoke. We were blown back into the room by the force of it. Girls tumbled and scrambled, arms and legs locked. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Later, John McNally and his friend from Fegan's, John Paul Kennedy, told how they had got into the laundry and attacked the clothes dryer, for that was the source of the fire, they thought. When the extinguishers were emptied, the men came out gasping for air. One of the nuns begged McNally, come now, like a good boy, go in and try again. He asked for a wet cloth, and Monaghan tied it around his nose and mouth. Armed again with fire extinguishers brought now from Sullivan's store, he went back into the laundry, where the wooden walls were crackling with flames. But McNally soon fell senseless and Kennedy dragged him out. Come out! Come out this way! The fire escape is open. It was Mary Caffey's voice, but we could not find the way for the smoke was curdling thick. Then Una Smith said to us, what if there are still girls in Sacred Heart? How do we know that all came out? So some went with her to check. With the tarry smoke and the solid dark, we could see naught. But we ran our hands over the beds, working down all the 6 rows. So it was there we found Dolly Duffy, who was deaf. So we pulled her out. Then we were crossing back to St. Clair's, but we could not see the way. Then Una said, it is this way out. But we said, no, no. For she was running into solid, gusting smoke. We called after her, but it was too late and she had gone. Dolly Duffy also said, it is better this way, down the wooden stairs. Come, come. We must run or we shall burn. But we said, no, no. There is no way through. For we now felt sure that all below was alight. But Dolly Duffy picked up an apron and wrapped it over her head. Then she rushed through an act of contrition, and though we pleaded and pleaded with her to stay, yet she ran away from us down the wooden stairs. Later, it was the testimony of John McNally that, when he recovered consciousness, he asked, the children are out, are they not? You have got the children out. He was shouting it then at those who stood all about, but no one wanted to reply, until he shook Monaghan by the collar. No, no, Monaghan said. The children are up there. Here, take the keys. See what you may do. Blessed Mary, have mercy on us. So McNally went up the iron staircase, but the smoke was too dense. It was just as he turned to come down that he saw a girl burst out of the other door, and the soles of her feet were burning. She ran screaming across the courtyard, her arms waving, her eyes rolling, screaming and screaming, her feet blazing fire. 40 feet up to our dormitory. We knew we were trapped. And yet we said, get the youngest children out. That's what we must do. So we pushed them ahead of us toward the closed door. Then we pulled it open, but so strangling and grasping were the fumes which burst in that we could only push it shut again, our eyes stinging and swollen. We tried then to get to the window, crawling over beds or under them, keeping low to the floor, until we were looking down into the courtyard. Down below, all was chaos and commotion, with many people running to and fro. We heard them shout that the ladders were coming. We opened the windows and bashed on the sections which did not give. Some of us sat on the beds and gathered the smaller children around us. We began to lead them in a decade of the Rosary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Those down below knew that ladders were then the only hope. So they ran through the unlit streets to the market yard, where they knew the town council kept ladders, and tried to raise the caretaker. He had no bell to his quarters, but after much yelling and bashing, a window opened. The caretaker was angry to be woken, so he flung the keys down and they were lost in the dark. Louis Blessing then had found a bicycle and pedaled furiously up to the Central Hotel, where he and several other bachelors in the town had rooms. He burst into the room of Maddie Hands, shouting and roaring. Grabbing hold of Maddie's shoulder, he pulled him from the bed. Maddie sang Lewis, "What are you doing, you blessed fool?" For he thought this was some jest. But soon enough he understood, for Maddie Hands worked with the electricity supply board and had ladders in the back of his van. While Maddie dressed, Lewis cycled back to the market yard, where he found people still stumbling around trying to find the key. But it was hopeless in the dark, so they smashed open a door, and finally the ladders were located and the men seized them and ran to Sullivan's yard. On the way, they met a squad of soldiers brought out of the town barracks and now quick marching in formation up the main street. Coming into the courtyard, the men with ladders and the soldiers found a crowd gripped by panic. Sparks, fireballs, and pieces of slate were raining down. Flames and smoke billowed out of every window. The 3 top windows were crowded with a sea of childish faces. Screaming, praying, coughing, calling out, "Get us out, we are smothering." Then a girl jumped, rising up first, so it seemed, like some great white bird, then dipping down, falling faster and faster through the air. Even the blankets spread out below could not break her fall. We were trying to say the rosary again. Dear Lord, we were trying. But the little children were all screaming. Once again, some of us went to the door and tried to open it, but we were suffocated by smoke. Mary Lowry, with her gold chain still around her neck, dropped to the floor. Kathleen crawled under the beds to the window. When we were halfway through the 3rd decade of the rosary, we could go no further. So we joined those others then at the window. I am sorry to say that we were treading on the younger children who were down below and had been knocked senseless by the fumes. We could not do otherwise, as we must have air. We saw down below poor Maureen, who had jumped, and Miss Harrington standing near her. But Miss Harrington never went to pick her up. It was Dolly Duffy, though her feet were burnt black. She was the one as went to pick poor broken Maureen up. Then we saw men putting up a ladder against the wall, but it fell short of the window. Look. Look. See, it does not reach. How will we get down? Back again then to the door to make one last attempt to get out that way. But now flames poured in and we could not get the door shut again. Such was the force of the blast. Below we saw the men, and the soldiers also, struggling to extend the ladders. One went up partially but did not reach our window and came off the pulleys. The other had ropes tied around it. The men got them untangled, but still it would not extend. So they lashed the 2 pieces together, but as it went up, it soon swayed and fell apart. We heard then a rush and crash as the wooden stairs below us collapsed. The men were calling up then, telling us to jump. We said, no, for it was too far down, but still another did jump. A man tried his best to hold her, but she too crashed down, smashing her legs. To one side there was a lean-to shed, and one girl tried also to jump onto there, but she bounced off and hit the ground. After that, none of us wanted to jump. We saw men place a section of the council ladder on the roof of the lean-to shed. One man then came up and stood up close to the window. "Come on, girl. Come on. Jump. Jump." So one did, then another and another. But when the 4th jumped, the man lost his balance. He and the child fell on the shed roof and the ladder crashed to the ground. The window then was burning hot. The glass cracking, blowing out, melting down. The floor started to go. Wardrobes and beds disappeared into the furnace. One girl was lying unconscious on her bed, the clothes on her back on fire. Then she disappeared. The 2 Carols were calling for each other and the McKiernans, hollering and spluttering, arms outstretched. Then the floor where they were disappeared. Only those of us on the windowsill now were left. Praise God, a man came with a better ladder, got it extended in seconds. But though we were throat-raw and suffocated, we were afeared to go. He put out his hands and pulled some of us off, placing us on the ladder so that we might get down. But when it came to the turn of Bernadette, who was but 7 years old, she tried to go back into the room. Such was her terror. Teresa it was went after her and tried to catch hold of her. But Bernadette still was wriggling away back into the flames, though only a tiny patch of floor was left. So Teresa then got hold of her by the hair, pulled her toward the window, dragged her hand toward the man on the ladder so that he then got her down. Though by then Bernadette's back and hair were all flaming alight. At the inquiry, it was explained that it was Maddie Hands who finally got the ladders up. Also Dr. John Sullivan, brother of those Sullivans who owned the store. When he got abreast of the window, it was pumping tarry smoke. He had only time to look through for one moment. A heap of children was struggling about the level of the window. Cries were still coming there. But he could not breathe and came a step or two down the ladder, putting his head under the windowsill where the air was clearer. As he hung there, he heard still the groans and cries from within. Again, he pulled his head over the sill, but he could see little, and the smoke was making him weak. I would have done anything on this earth to get in, but I could not do it. As he came down the ladder, flames smashed out through the window above. A roar, a heaving, a smash of timbers. Another as the roof blew right into the night. He called and called then, shouting until his voice was hoarse, but no voice from the window echoed back to him. The time was 2:40 a.m. The next day, the orphanage was nothing but a burnt-out frame, with damp wisps of smoke curling out through the debris. Only the many iron beds could you see still standing, stuck up in curved shapes, like the rib cages of so many skeleton beasts, and a pile of hoops lying in the yard. All the businesses in the town were closed, and a sickening smell spread all about. Matt McKiernan, the brother of Mary and Susan, who lived 12 miles from Cavan, was told of the fire that morning and pedaled furiously to Butler's Bridge, where he went to the post office and called to the Garda, who told him then that his sisters were dead. Although it was Lent at that time, and many were on the tack, yet they did take to the liquor that day. It was not until darkness was falling that all the bodies were brought out. Then the men shouldered the coffins and took them to the convent chapel, laid them down near the altar. Over the days that followed, donations flooded in to the bishop and the abbess from all around. Yet no one thought to get a call through to Matt McKiernan and his brother Hugh, who had lost their 2 sisters. So when the family came into the town to the funeral, the procession had already gone out to Cully's graveyard. But Mrs. Carroll, who had lost 2 daughters, now she was at the funeral, gripping the hand of her surviving daughter, whom she had dressed in a scarlet coat. I'll never step into a Catholic church again as long as I live. Later we were asked, those of us who still had tongues to speak, about what happened. For an inquiry was established by Judge McCarthy, sent up from Dublin. You must say your age and your work within the orphanage: cook, portress, maid, needleworker, or laundress. Even though you fainted, you must go back the next day. Though at least for the inquiry, no one had to walk out in 2 left boots, as was often the way. Just as we had learned the catechism, so the nuns taught us what we must say. It was said, of course, many of those orphan girls are simple. But we were not simple. We were frightened. Nuns with the rosary on their wrists, the cane hanging next to it. Mother Carmel would strip your clothes from your body, beat you skinless. We were asked again and again, you knew the instructions in case of a fire, so why did you not follow those procedures? Yet that question was never asked of the nuns. It was a pitiful business when all was told. That was widely agreed. It was said in the town the brigade were not fit to wash a bus. It was also said privately, course the building burnt so fast due to all that floor polish. Yet the council were able to reassure the inquiry that faulty equipment had played no part. The ladders and hoses were all in excellent order. Questions were asked about the fire escape. It was but 7 foot away from the dormitory, so why were the children not able to get out? And the lights in the building, why were they switched off? Miss O'Reilly was questioned at some length. Was there not a full 15 minutes during which those children could have been brought down? Miss O'Reilly could not say. The questioning made her confused. She was also the sister of the Mother Abbess, and so must be treated with respect. Which nun was it who had tried to prevent the men from going up the fire escape? No. That was not what happened. The question could not be pursued. Nor was it asked why some of those girls were ever in the orphanage, for many were not orphans. Susan and Mary McKiernan had brothers and a father. But after their mother died, they were sent to the orphanage. A neighbor offered to take them, but that woman was a Protestant, so she was not allowed. Yet in truth, you could not blame the nuns. Sure, they took those children in, and the state gave them no money for it. They were good women who did their best. Yet still, in the town it was whispered, it was because those girls must not be seen in their nightdresses by the men of the town. We are the children of Cavan. Have you heard speak of us? From all around they saw us burn, but none could help, now and in the hour of our death. Sure, it was discipline and fear which killed us, not the wire in the laundry clothes dryer. We are still waiting at the window, and Louis Blessing is still bashing at the fire escape with a mop, and Matt McKiernan is still riding his bike to Butler's Bridge and to the phone call that will stake his heart. John McNally, please, will you bring the ladder up to us? Or must we run to heaven with our feet on fire? They put on our gravestone, "Children, pray for us." 35 girls, but only 8 coffins. It was only Mary Lowry they could identify, her with the gold cross she had from the bishop. All of the nuns safe enough, so God be praised. Many years have passed now. It was long ago, but we are still waiting. Please, will you not put up the ladders and bring us down? This story is based on documents and personal testimony relating to the fire at St. Joseph's Orphanage in Cavan on the night of February 23, 1943. The end.